they couldn't be more poisonous for the Labour Party if Nigel Farage had written them himself. They were arguing essentially that the human rights of the illegal migrants trump the concerns of local residents, and that therefore the people of Epping just had to suck it up. So we'll wait to see what happens with this. There is another High Court case in October, which would be about a permanent ban on migrants being housed in the Bell Hotel. But as you say, no one could look at this case and come to any other...
Illegal migrants cheering Starmer, global talent drag queens on visas, while Brits seethe, the courts just chose illegals over locals. Douglas Murray was right, Britain's borders are a joke. Watch before the next outrage drops.
Tom, locals are understandably furious with PM Starmer and with the courts, who seem to have put the welfare of illegals over the welfare of Brits.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, there's the ruling itself. There's also the fact that the government decided to engage in this case, trying to overturn the High Court injunction that was placed on the Bell Hotel, suggesting that it should remove all of the migrants who are living there. The government stated policy is that it wants to close these hotels. It intervened in this case in order to keep one open. And if you look at the arguments that the Home Office's lawyers were making in court, they couldn't be more poisonous for the Labour Party if Nigel Farage had written them himself. They were arguing essentially that the human rights of the illegal migrants trump the concerns of local residents, and that therefore the people of Epping just had to suck it up. So we'll wait to see what happens with this. There is another High Court case in October, which would be about a permanent ban on migrants being housed in the Bell Hotel. But as you say, no one could look at this case and come to any other conclusion than the government is basically on the side of illegal migrants and, frankly, these spiv hotel companies who are doing pretty well out of this arrangement, rather than the people of Epping or anywhere else.
Oh, it's an absolute disgrace, seriously. Now, look, continuing with the open border policy, it seems Britain has welcomed Turkish transgender drag queens on special visas for global talent. The Telegraph is reporting the drag queens are among Nigerian rappers and poets who now have platforms offering advice on how to obtain UK visas, while singers in African evangelical churches have also been granted these talent visas. I mean, seriously, Tom, you can't make this stuff up. They're literally outsmarting everyone.
I know, absolutely. This story can be more perfect if you or I had written it to just have something to talk about. It's very amusing. It's absurd. I mean, there has been 178% rise in the use of these global talent visas. And if a proper immigration system is supposed to be about plugging gaps we can't otherwise fill, if it's supposed to be about welcoming talent we don't otherwise have here, having just look at the BBC website, it's not clear to me that we have any lack of drag queens in the UK at the moment, and yet we're welcoming them from foreign shores. And I think one thing of the story that is a bit galling, though, is that you've got people like Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary from the Tory party, saying this is ridiculous and outrageous and obviously needs to be looked at. This rise has taken place since 2019, 5 out of 6 of those years the Tories were in power. So it's one of those things that this mess certainly needs to be cleaned up where immigration is concerned. But I think people are increasingly realising this is a mess of the Tories making as much as it is Labour's.
Well, if they don't realise it after that, they'll never realise it. Speaking of the Tories, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch will make a major announcement on energy policy this week, I believe. She's going to promise to extract as much oil and gas from the North Sea as possible. Sounds a little bit like Donald Trump's drill, baby, drill.
No, absolutely. It's certainly being briefed in that way. This is being bigged up as a kind of big departure for the Conservative Party, who have been pretty slow on this issue, as they have been on many other issues, but are now keen to stake out quite a clear claim. I mean, this is commonsensical, as Kemi Badenoch has said. The fact that we are essentially refusing to exploit the North Sea oil and gas reserves, even as you've got Norway and neighbouring countries doing so in the precise same seabed and building up a lot of wealth for their citizens as a consequence, just doesn't make any sense. It's also a big problem for the Labour Party. I mean, this is going to, the ban on new oil and gas extraction in the North Sea will destroy various communities in Scotland. It will cost thousands of jobs. Even unions have been saying that this is going to be like Thatcher closing the mines again in terms of people's living standards. So it's an important move. I think it's another sign that the kind of vibe shift on net zero is well and truly underway in British politics. And it's really going to put Labour on the back foot, because they are really wedded to this green zealotry in a way that no other party within a chance of gaining power in British politics is anymore.
Yeah,
I cannot ignore the fact that the Court of Appeal has once again used the Human Rights Act as a battering ram against the clearly expressed will of the British people. When judges claim that the rights of Somali nationals who crossed a dozen safe countries override the right of Epping residents to decide what happens in their own town, They are not dispensing justice, they are enforcing a foreign legal order parachuted into our statute book by Tony Blair in 1998. That act is the single greatest obstacle to democratic self-government this country has faced since the 1970s, and every conservative leadership contest since 2016 has promised to scrap or radically reform it. Yet here we are, 8 years after Brexit, still hostage to the same Strasbourg logic that says a migrant who has never paid a penny into the system must be housed in four-star hotels while British veterans sleep in shop doorways. The Epping case is not an isolated glitch. It is the direct consequence of Labour's decision to instruct the government legal service to fight on the migrants' side. Sir Keir Starmer, who once styled himself the country's chief prosecutor, is now the migrants' chief advocate. The Home Office lawyers told the court that the public sector equality duty required them to prioritise the welfare of non-citizens over the safety and sanity of council taxpayers. That is not a neutral reading of the law, it is a deliberate ideological choice, rooted in the Equalities Act 2010, another Blair-Brown landmine. I have read the pleadings myself. The phrase disproportionate impact on the local community appears once the phrase vulnerable asylum seekers appears 43 times. That is the balance of priorities in black and white. Meanwhile, the hotel operator, Britannia, is charging the Home Office $148 per room per night, meals included. Multiply that by 150 rooms, then by 365 nights, and you arrive at just over $8 million a year for a single site. Across the country, there are 395 hotels still block-booked for asylum claimants, down from a peak of 430 under the last Conservative government, but still costing north of $3 billion annually. That figure does not include security, health tourism, or the Home Office escorts who ferry migrants to and from court. Every pound of that money is borrowed, because the Treasury is running a $120 billion deficit. Our grandchildren will still be paying the interest on today's hotel bills long after the current guests have moved on to permanent housing and full welfare access. The global talent visa scandal is an even clearer proof that the system is being gamed. The route was created in 2014 for Nobel laureates, Oscar winners, and the occasional chess grandmaster. Last year, 5,700 people were granted leave under it, including, according to the Arts Council list, Turkish transgender performance collective Anatolia Divas. I looked them up. Their last show was a burlesque homage to Istanbul Pride, filmed in a basement bar in Dalston. I have nothing against burlesque, but I do object to my taxes subsidizing acts that would struggle to fill a pub in Shoreditch being rebranded as exceptional talent. The visa comes with a national insurance number on arrival and a fast track to indefinite leave to remain after 3 years. That is not a cultural exchange, it is a backdoor immigration scheme, and it is booming because the salary threshold for the main skilled worker route was raised to $38,700. Employers who want cheaper labor now simply relabel the job globally talented and bypass the cap entirely. The Home Office guidance says applicants must be endorsed by one of 7 approved bodies. One of them is the British Fashion Council, whose board includes executives from Burberry and Stella McCartney. Last year, the council endorsed 1,200 applicants, 900 of whom were creative stylists from Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa. I have seen the portfolio's identical photo shoots, identical bios, many copy-pasted from Instagram influencers. The endorsing officer spends on average 8 minutes per file, 8 minutes to decide whether Britain gains a new citizen. That is not oversight, it is conveyor belt rubber stamping, and it is happening because every extra body adds to the client base of the public sector unions who now dominate the quongocracy. The North Sea debate crystallizes everything wrong with Labour's energy policy. Sir Keir has promised to ban all new exploration licences by the end of this Parliament, even though the Climate Change Committee admits UK consumption of oil and gas will fall by only 65 by 2050. The shortfall will be met by imports. In 2023, the UK imported 21 million tonnes of liquefied natural gas, mostly from Qatar and the United States, at spot prices 4 times higher than pre-COVID levels. Every cargo ship that docks at Milford Haven emits more CO in a week than the entire Cambo field would produce in a year. So we are not reducing global emissions, we are simply offshoring them, while sending $20 billion a year abroad that could have stayed in Aberdeen and Peterhead. Kemi Badenoch's pledge to lift the moratorium is therefore the first serious act of economic patriotism from a frontline politician since Liz Truss's mini-budget. The SNP Green coalition in Holyrood howls about climate vandalism, but their own civil service briefing papers, leaked to the Scottish Daily Express, warn that the ban will cost 100,000 jobs and 25 billion in lost tax revenue by 2030. North East Scotland already has the skills the same companies that laid subsea cables for offshore wind can drill wells the same welders who built jacket foundations can fabricate pipelines. What they need is regulatory certainty and a tax regime that rewards investment rather than punishes it. Norway's marginal tax rate on new fields is 78, but allowances and depreciation schedules bring the effective rate down to 49. The UK's energy profits levy now stands at 75 with no such relief, so capital flees across the median line. A Conservative government that reversed that levy and fast-tracked seismic surveys could have new fields producing within 5 years, just as global LNG prices spike again after America's election year export restrictions kick in. The broader point is that none of these policies, immigration, energy, welfare, exist in isolation. They form a single tapestry of managed decline woven by a governing class that no longer believes in national sovereignty. The Human Rights Act, the Equalities Act, the Climate Change Act, and the Online Safety Act together create a legal cage in which elected politicians are free only to argue about the speed at which they implement directives from judges, activists, and foreign regulators. That is why Reform UK is polling at 17, even with a leader who has been absent from the Commons for months. Millions of voters have concluded that the Conservative Party will never repeal the legislation that empowers the courts, the quangos, and the open borders lobby. Until MPs are willing to tear up those statutes and replace them with a sovereign immigration code, a sovereign energy policy, and a sovereign Bill of Rights, the anger in places like Epping will keep boiling over, and the next set of thank you videos addressed to the Prime Minister will be recorded not in hotel corridors, but in council houses that were meant for British families.